Because your true writing self, if you're using your writing voice, includes all the pieces of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the utterly despicable, and they are going to be exposed on the page. If you're gonna take the time to tell a story, then tell a story that matters. Having a clear and distinctive writing voice is something that can quickly separate you from every other screenwriter trying to break in. It's the style, the spice that you bring to the script and make it uniquely your own. And one of the best compliments you can receive is someone saying, "I knew this script was yours as soon as I started reading it because you have such a unique voice." But finding your own writing voice is a challenge because as soon as you start talking about finding your voice, it's like it vaporizes.
There was once a dream that was Rome. You could only whisper it. Anything more than a whisper, and it would vanish.
So how can you learn about writing voice if the very act of talking about it makes it disappear?
Maximus, let us whisper now, together, you and I.
There are ways to find and discover and hone your writing voice. In fact, I devote a couple of lessons to your writing voice in my course, the Screenwriting Fast Track. But when we start talking about discovering or developing your writing voice, what we are really getting at is you discovering or developing and then tapping into your true, authentic self. That you are willing to be vulnerable on the page, naked, exposed, for all the world to see everything, which includes what you want them to see and what you've got stashed away in your closets, because all of it comes out on the page if you are tapping into your writing voice. But that's a result of you being able to employ your voice. But how do you actually find it? I mean, how do you discover it? Well, practicing the craft is the obvious one, right? I mean, if you write, and the more you write, the more your voice is going to come out. The more your voice will begin to reveal itself and emerge or blossom. But if it were just practicing the craft, everyone would be finding their writing voice eventually. But I don't want eventually for you. I want you to get there faster. I want you to be efficient. So before we talk about 3 ways to discover your voice, besides practicing the craft, we have to talk about ways you shouldn't be using to try and discover your voice. And then at the end, I'm going to throw in a little bonus tip, something you can literally start doing today that will help you start to find and discover your voice quickly. Number 1 thing you should not do is don't try to copy someone else's style. I have, unfortunately, seen other writing teachers employ this technique, and I've even had a few of those teachers myself, and they encouraged the students to mimic the writing style of an author that we emulated. And it was fun to do, but all it did was teach me to copy someone else instead of teaching me to develop my own style, my own voice. And when writers are trying to learn, they think, you know, I really like stories by this other screenwriter. And so they try to copy them to replicate the success of the established writer in themselves.
I have a plan.
You've got a plan.
Yes.
First of all, you're copying me from when I said I had a plan.
No, I'm not. People say that all the time. It's not that unique of a thing to say.
The thinking is something like, you know, if I can write something like Aaron Sorkin, then I can sell it because people buy his stuff, so that means they'll probably buy mine. The problem is there is already an Aaron Sorkin. And you ain't him. You will never be him. You might be able to replicate or impersonate some of his dialogue style, but your script will feel flat. And that's because you are trying to be someone that you're not. And you won't be using your own authentic voice.
What percentage?
I don't know. 12%.
12%? That is not a plan.
Barely a concept.
You're taking their side?
So copying someone else's style might be helpful in learning the craft of screenwriting, but it will not be helpful at all in honing and cultivating your own writing voice. In fact, it will stunt the growth of your own voice because you are too busy trying to replicate someone else's when you should be cultivating your own. The second way you shouldn't be trying to find your own voice is by trying to write to expectations, or at least what you perceive as the expectations of other people. So you've got this story you want to tell, and you think that if you do X and Y in it, that your dream producer is just going to love it because all of their stories have X and Y in them. Or you think this story is made for streaming services, and so you include things in your story that just come off as gratuitous because they aren't informed by the story. They are included because you think you're supposed to include them, but they don't ring true to the story and they don't align with your voice. Or maybe you go the other way. Maybe you think because of your life experience, your personal faith, or whatever things contribute to the uniqueness of you means that there are certain stories or certain topics that you can't or shouldn't include, because if you do, there will be others in your life who then shun you. I mean, if you write that story about a promiscuous teenager, what will the people at church, for example, think of you? And on one level, these are valid concerns as far as the topics of what you write are concerned, but not when they begin to impact the discovery and the honing of your writing voice, which has to do with how you tell the story, not what the story is. So it's perfectly fine to put limits on the topics you're writing about, on the topics of stories we choose to tell, because all of us do have a line that we won't cross or things that we will not under any circumstances include in our stories. But what you have to learn to do is to not put those filters, to put those limits on your writing voice, on how you write those stories. And this is a difficult needle to thread because most writers don't think of those two things as separate things, the topic of your story and how you tell the story, but they are two very distinct things. And you can, in fact, keep filters on this one, on the topics that you write about, and remove the filters on the other, the how you write, which is your voice. And when it comes to writing and finding your writing voice, when you sit down to write a story, you have to learn to turn all of those filters off for your writing voice to shine through. But if you're putting filters not only on what you say, but on how you say it, you're now squashing your writing voice. And this you cannot do. It's actually the first step in discovering your writing voice, and it's this. You have to learn to become comfortable with your authentic self in your writing and with how you write. There's no filters, there's no second guessing, there's no, I would never say that in real life. And to an extent that might be true. You might never say that in real actual life. But writing isn't real life, it's fiction. And your authentic writing voice should be practically filterless. You say exactly what you feel you need to say in exactly the way you feel you want to say it. You turn off all those can'ts and shouldn'ts and write from your gut, from your core, from the core of you, so that when all is written, it's you, fully you, on the page.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
So you have to learn to be comfortable with your true, authentic self. This means recognizing the good and identifying the bad in yourself. It means coming to terms with those skeletons you've got locked away in your closets. It means being willing to identify and admit the prejudices that you have. And we all have them. And you have to be willing to let them all leak out onto the page, because that's what's supposed to happen anyway. Being comfortable with yourself means engaging in self-examination, in self-awareness, and in self-evaluation to the point that you are fully comfortable with who you are. Because your true writing self, if you're using your writing voice, includes all the pieces of you, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the utterly despicable. And they are going to be exposed on the page. When I teach beginning screenwriters, I tell them I want to see their beating, bleeding heart pulsating on the page that should be dripping. And if you aren't willing to be vulnerable on the page, if you aren't willing to take the risk to let others know how you feel about things or people or whomever, you'll never find your writing voice. You'll never find your true self. You'll never discover who you are meant to be.
Won't you accept this great honor that I have offered you?
With all my heart, no.
Writing is a risk. It's you putting yourself out there for the world to see. And if you want to discover your writing voice, you have to learn to be comfortable with who you are as a person. And if you don't like yourself when you look in the mirror, then change yourself. Become the person you want to be outside of your writing so you can unapologetically display yourself inside of your writing. So if you aren't willing to be metaphorically naked on the page, you won't ever find your writing voice. And I know it sounds hard, and you're thinking, okay, that's hard, and I get it, Jake, but how do you do that? Like, how do you get there? Well, honestly, it just starts with you taking an unvarnished look at yourself. Maybe take a day. Go sit outside where there's no distraction. Get away from everything. Unplug and examine yourself. Are you content with who you are? Do you like who you are? What do you want or need to change? Who do you need to apologize to? Who do you need to make amends with? It's time to be a better you, the you 2.0, because the more content you are with yourself, the happier you are with you as a person, the easier it will be for you to turn off those filters when you're writing and to let your true authentic self come out on the page. The second thing you can do to discover your writing voice is to make sure you have a clear purpose or reason to write. If you're writing just to write, your voice, I'm sorry, it's just never going to come out. You have to have a purpose. You have to give it a direction, a slant, an angle. And I've mentioned this before, but storytelling at its core is about being benevolent, about sharing something of yourself with the world, about you giving something to others that you care about. And when you tap into that passion, that drive, that focus, it gives your words life and zest and flavor. And now it's not just words on a page. It's your words on a page that are there for a reason that matters deeply to you. And if it matters deeply to you, you'll do anything to get that story out there. And that comes out on the page. Plus, if you're doing this, it gives you further motivation to turn off the filters because you really want people to hear the story that you're trying to tell them. So why are you writing? Why are you telling the stories that you're choosing to tell? And more importantly, why are you the only one who can tell those stories? Because when you tell a story, you are infusing yourself into it. And you have to have a clear purpose for writing, a clear reason to write. And if you don't, the story falls flat because there's no life behind it. There's no you. There's no voice that gives it life. So if you want to discover your writing voice, you have to spend some time considering why you tell stories. One way to do that is to ask yourself questions like, why do you like the stories you like? I mean, what makes them resonate with you?
See? God's looking out for us. That's God looking out for us, Mark. I hate to see him piss.
If you're having trouble figuring out why you want to tell stories, figure out why certain stories resonate with you and why others don't. Why do you like this one and not that one? Because figuring that out will get you closer to figuring out why you love storytelling and why you want to tell stories. We as people, we like sharing with others the things that we love and care about. So you figure out why you love and care about it. So if you're having trouble discovering your own writing voice, it might be because you haven't spent adequate time trying to articulate why you're wanting to tell stories in the first place. The last way to discover your writing voice is to not only practice writing, which we've already mentioned, but to spend time writing the right things for you. Not the right things for somebody else, the right things for you. We can all agree there are different types of stories: action, adventure, horror, drama, rom-com, so on and so forth. But the thing is, your voice, at least when you're initially trying to develop it, is closely aligned to a specific story type. You may love, for example, you just love horror movies. You love them and you want to write them because you love them. But every time you try to write a horror story, it just comes off as flat or not scary or a host of other things that are going wrong. And so what do? Well, then you start trying to study the craft more. You're trying to learn more skills and tools with screenwriting, which can be helpful so you can kind of start to solve some of those problems. But your stories, they're only kind of working still. There's just something missing. What's missing is your voice, because your voice might be more naturally a rom-com voice, not a horror voice.
Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
But you haven't written enough things to know what you're good at writing yet. I mean, every writer starts off writing a story similar to the ones they like and would love to see on the big screen. And many new writers just try to write that one type of story. It's like, okay, I'm going to be a horror writer, so I'm just going to start writing horror. And they never branch out to try different types of stories. And as a result of not trying different types of stories, you're missing out on an opportunity to hone your voice. When I started writing, I thought I would primarily write two things: fantasy and sci-fi. I love a good fantasy or sci-fi story. I'm always watching those. Those are stories I thought I should be writing. Every one I tried to write when I was starting out, everyone I tried to write was a miserable disaster. So I tried writing other things, and only when I landed on writing action comedy did things make a massive positive turn for me. It's because my writing voice is more naturally aligned with those types of stories and the tones of those types of stories. Now I can more easily craft a fantasy or sci-fi story and integrate my voice into it, but only because I was able to write in some specific stories that helped me hone my voice. Those stories enhanced my own voice, and my own voice enhanced those stories that I was trying to tell, kind of like they were made for each other. So something you can do if you're having trouble finding your voice is to try and write a different kind of story. Maybe instead of a straight horror, you try a horror rom-com, or instead of a thriller, you try an action adventure. Just try something different, even as a short film, just a few pages of something. You'll have a chance to practice, you'll learn some new things, and you may find the right type of story that will help you let your voice come out. And here's a bonus tip for you. If you're having trouble finding your writing voice, start trying to journal every day for the next 2 months. You don't have to do it forever if you don't like it. It's totally fine. But commit to doing it for the next 2 months. Every writing student I have had who incorporated a regular practice of journaling, because they were writing to themselves, they were automatically turning off all their filters. Every student who had a regular practice of journaling was able to more quickly find their writing voice. It was practice writing and practice turning off the filters, and when you journal, you are naturally a little more introspective and willing to examine your own life, which can help you in becoming more comfortable with yourself as a person, thus helping you more quickly find your voice. So if you're stuck, try journaling for 60 days. That's it. Just try journaling for 60 days. See if that starts to help you out. But if you want to unpack more about your writing voice and a host of other things that will help you become the screenwriter you want to become, be sure to check out the Screenwriting Fast Track course, which is linked below. And if you want to know some other reasons why your screenplay may not be working, you can check out this video right here. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget about all of the buttons, and when you tell a story that matters. See you later.